Hey everyone, it's Catherine with Built Rome Designs, and welcome to part 4 of the making of this Viking knit chain. In part 3, we completed our Viking knit weave itself, and for part 4, we're going to be focusing on these little end caps along with the creation of this hook. That way you can wear this piece as a bracelet, and you can even create a necklace if you'd like. Quick little rundown over the tools and materials needed for this project, just in case you already know how to create a Viking knit weave and are only here for the components. Of course, you see we need 18 gauge wire. I like to use half hard for this project, but you can definitely use dead soft. Next up, we have our wire cutters, preferably flush, but it doesn't really matter as long as it cuts some wire. Of course, you're going to need a pair of chain nose pliers. These are absolutely your best friend whenever you're creating wire wrap jewelry. You also need a pair of round nose pliers, just simple round nose pliers. And this little tool right here is called a bail maker. It'll help you make those spiral end caps. And if you don't have one of these, don't fret. You can just grab a chopstick that's going to be about the size that you need. You can also use a skewer or about a 4mm mandrel. And last but not least, we have our pointy tool. This is also called a bead reamer, or you can use a pointy file, whatever you choose here, just something nice and pokey. All right, we're ready to rock, we're ready to craft, so grab your completed Viking knit chain, and we're going to start with the creation of the spiral end caps and then move on to the making of the hook. I'm going to begin with my usual discretion and let you guys know that I will be zooming in and out during this process so that way you can actually get a really close-up view as to what's going on here. Go ahead and grab your bead reamer, and we're going to start by taking all of the loops at the end of your Viking knit and putting them all in a row. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Basically, we're going to make sure that all of the loop openings are facing the same way. So here I've already gotten started on 2 of the loops, and as you can see, I'm just taking my pointy tool and driving the tool through those loops themselves to open them up. You also want to make sure that they're nice and flush and even at the top. So this one I'm pulling up right here. You want to make sure you're doing that through this process, very similar to whenever we created our tool. So just pull up on those loops and twist them, turn them, do whatever you have to do to make sure that they're all facing the same way. Okay, quick pause. You see that? All of those loops are facing the exact same way. They're all nice and flush and even, and that's exactly what you want. Carrying on, we're going to continue making sure that our loops are all facing the exact same way. I'm leaving this portion in real time so that way you can see how tedious this process is. Of course, feel free to pause at any time if you need some extra time to catch up. And we're going to go ahead and begin feeding all of our loops onto our pointy tool. Here's a little pause here so that way you can see exactly what's going on. If you have a straggler loop that will not pull up, as you could partially see for a second, I will show you what to do from here. Absolute bare minimum, you want at least 4 loops fed onto your pointy tool. Okay, so now for our straggler loop, we are going to test it first. So as you notice, we're going to pull up on it, and it's not really pulling up to be flush with all of the other loops, so we're not even going to worry about it. It's going to end up being closed off in that spiral end cap that we're going to make later. And this is what it should look like. If any of your loops are closed or smashed, go ahead and open those up now before we move on to our next step. Okay, it is end cap time. We finally get to move on to something a little bit more fun. So go ahead and grab your 18 gauge round wire. As I said earlier in the video, I prefer to use half hard for this part, but you can absolutely use dead soft. I just find that half hard has a little bit more strength, which is definitely helpful for whenever it comes to longevity. I obviously did not measure here. I tend to eyeball this part, but you're just going to want to take about a 2 to 3 inch piece of this 18 gauge wire and cut it off. We're going to go ahead and cut a second one for the other end of the Viking knit weave. So just line up that first cut that you made and cut off another piece roughly the same size. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move this 18 gauge wire out of the way, and now I'm going to move on to show you what we're going to do with these tiny pieces of wire. Go ahead and set one of those pieces of wire down to reserve for later and pick up your Viking knit weave. Go ahead and double check to make sure all 4 of your loops are open. If you have 5, amazing, but at least make sure you have 4. Go ahead and take your 18 gauge wire and feed that through the loops that we've just created. This is what this should look like. You also want to make sure that there is about an inch on the left-hand side, as you can see here, and then a couple inches on the right-hand side. Keep in mind that the way the wire is fed on here is important, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our next step, which is curving this wire up. You're basically going to turn this wire into a sharp U shape. Now that you have your sharp U, you're going to take the short side of the wire and fold it behind the longer side of the wire. You're essentially going to be folding this 18 gauge wire around the loops that we fed it through. Here's a little pause action for you so far, so that way you can see what this looks like. And from here, we're just going to continue looping this wire around, or folding it rather, around the loops. You want to make sure that it's nice and tight. Still needs a little bit extra tightening, so I'm going to pull down on that short side of the wire to round it out a little bit more. Okay, so it looks pretty good right now. This is what yours should look like. If it has a little bit of movement, don't worry about it too much. We're going to end up tightening this loop down. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and grab our wire cutters. And we're going to cut the short end of the wire as close to the Viking knit as we possibly can, but do not cut those loops. This is about where you should be cutting. Do not cut the loops. Otherwise, we're going to have to start from square one. So just very carefully snip off the short end of the wire close to the Viking knit. And here's about what it should look like. Hang on, I'm going to pause this for you. It should look just about like this right now. Go ahead and grab your chain nose pliers, and we are going to clamp this little loop down. Let me get into focus here. There we go. All right, so close that off. As far as that spacing, go ahead and close off any spacing, and then we're going to squeeze that end that we just trimmed off. We're going to squeeze it around those loops. We want it to be nice and tight. You don't want it to have too much wiggle room. We are going to do a little bit of adjusting. If you notice that that long end of the wire is sitting at about a 90-degree angle from the Viking knit weave, you want to pull that up to where it is parallel to it. Take your time with this part, because if you pull up a little bit too hard, it'll undo that loop that you just made around the smaller loops. So if that does happen, just tighten it down with your pliers, but just be gentle while you're doing this part. Also, this is exactly what this should look like, and we're going to go ahead and move on to doing this exact same thing to the other end of your Viking knit weave. Definitely want to talk to you about a little something while we're repeating this exact same process on the other end. I did not mention this earlier, nor did I film it, but if you need to trim your Viking knit weave, you can absolutely do that. Even if it's a lot, if you want to cut it in half, you can. If you want to cut just about an inch off, then you can. Whatever length you'd like, but just be aware that whenever you do make that cut, that a lot of little tiny pieces that will begin falling from your Viking knit weave. Don't freak out if this happens. This is very normal. All you need to do is take your chain nose pliers and pull out each of those pieces, and you will have fresh loops ready to rock and roll and ready to do this exact process with. Okay, I think you've got this part from here. I'm going to go ahead and leave you with some tunes, and if you need a full refresher, rewind back to the 4-minute and 30-second mark. Otherwise, I will talk to you in just a few. Enjoy the tunes. All right, so now we have both ends completed. I hope it was easy for you to take care of the second time. Now we're going to be moving on to these end cap spirals that you see here along with that loop. And that loop is what your hook is going to hook onto. So once again, grab your 18 gauge wire, half hard or dead soft, doesn't matter either way. And then go ahead and pick up your bail making pliers. The size that we're going to be using today is about 3 to 4 millimeters. So it'll be the small side of these pliers, but you can get different types of bail making pliers. Just grab anything that's around 3 to 4 millimeter and you will be good to go. As you all know, I typically like to work as much as I can with the wires still on the spool, and this is perfect for that. It leads to way less waste. So all we're going to do is take our bail making pliers, again using 3 to 4 millimeters, and we're going to begin coiling that wire around. You definitely want to make sure that this is a nice tight coil, meaning that there's no spacing. So if there is, as you can see, what I'm doing here is just squeezing it to where the wires are still touching each other, and just continue coiling the wire around your bail making pliers. I'm going to speed this up a touch because I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but you're going to want to wrap this around about 7 or 8 times. And this is what it should look like. So as you notice, there is no spacing. Everything is nice and tight. If you have any gapping or anything like that, just simply grab your chain nose pliers like this and kind of crunch it down gently. Definitely do this gently, but just kind of squeeze it together to make sure that there are no spaces. Now you want to remove your coil from your bail making pliers, and we're going to pick up our handy dandy wire cutters. For design and quality sake, I always like to make sure that my ends line up with each other. So whenever you're trimming off that long wire from the spool, just make sure that it goes in line with that top end of the wire. Then if you want to get really fancy with it, you can grab a file, or you can even use your bead reamer if you have one, and just file those sharp ends down just so they're not as pokey. I'm a big advocate for filing those really rough edges down. It just elevates the quality of pieces. Your turn to make a second one. Talk to you in a few. Now that you finished your two coils, we're going to add them to the chain. This part is pretty easy compared to the next parts, but bear with me here. So just take one end of your Viking knit with that little pokey end there, and we're going to slip on one of the coils that you made. It may be a little tight, which is a great thing. So you can just rotate it on there, just kind of twist it on. That should do it. You don't want to pull it down too far, otherwise it might get stuck on the weave. So we're going to move on to the hook from here. Grab your chain nose pliers, and we're going to give this 18 gauge stem one more squeeze. Just tighten it around really nicely around that weave. This is going to help further secure that wire stem and also bring it to an angle, and I will explain why here in just a second. Time for the round nose pliers to come out and make an appearance. So grab your round nose pliers, and what we're going to do is take this stem and turn it into a loop. With your round nose pliers, you're going to hold on to the stem like this, and you're going to take that stem and wrap it around the large part of the round nose pliers. You can absolutely go a little bit smaller if you prefer. I just like the look of a bigger loop. And this is what it should look like, nice and round as a loop should be, and now we're going to cut off that tail end. Essentially what this is going to do is turn this loop into a jump ring. Double check to make sure that your wire cutters are only around the tail end and not any of the other part of the wire. And you see that? We got a file. It's time to file again. Use your bead reamer, take a regular file, use sandpaper, it doesn't matter, just anything to get rid of that nasty rough edge. Now it's time to close the loop, so just take your chain nose pliers and gently close that. We're going to do one final tighten on the base of that jump ring loop, and this is what it should look like. Now we're on to securing the coil. So all we're going to do is twist that coil up over the base of the jump ring that we just created. You want that part to be covered. It just makes it look a little bit more clean. Here's a little overview of what it should look like so far. If you notice, that base of the jump ring we just created is completely covered, and that's exactly what you want. And it's officially time to tighten this coil down, so grab your chain nose pliers, and we are going to begin at the top, and we're going to very gently push this down. Remember to use a lot of finesse here. You definitely don't want to crunch it down. You want that coil to remain as rounded as possible. We're just crimping it down to keep it from shifting across the chain. Notice how I am tightening this coil together. Sometimes it gets a little gappy during this process. Don't worry about it, just gently tighten it together. We're moving from the top down, so just gently at the bottom of the coil closest to the Viking knit itself, gently crimp that down. And again, take your time with this. It is a little bit tedious. I'm leaving this in real time, but also can you see how that is not going anywhere? You absolutely do not want these coils shifting around, so what we have right now is perfect. She's not going anywhere, and make sure that what you have in front of you is the exact same way. If not, just work on it a little bit further to make sure that that coil doesn't shift around. You can pause right here if you need a little bit more time, but we're going to go ahead and move over to the other side of the Viking knit weave and finish that off. I'm going to speed this up a bit and leave you with some tunes. Up next, we'll be working on the hook. Talk to you soon. Congratulations, you have finished this portion of the Viking knit weave chain, and we're going to move on to the making of the hook so that way you can actually wear your creation. Once again, you're going to grab your spool of 18 gauge wire, and for this part, you are also going to want a ruler. We're going to start by simply measuring 3 inches of the 18 gauge copper wire. You're going to snip it at that 3-inch mark. Go ahead and move that wire out of the way. And again, you should just have 3 inches of 18 gauge copper wire or silver, whatever you're using. Once again, you're going to grab your ruler and we're just going to measure the halfway point of 3 inches, which is 1.5 inches. You can grab a Sharpie to mark that halfway point on the wire if you'd prefer. I like to use my finger. I just hold on to it at that halfway point and grab my chain nose pliers. You can grab yours as well, and we are going to begin folding this wire in half. This half fold is pretty well going to be crimped at the end, so just take your chain nose pliers and crimp that down where it looks like this. If your fold's a little off center and one side of the wire is longer than the other, no big deal at all. You do want them to be even, so just take your wire cutters and snip off that long end. Quick pause. I totally forgot to film the filing portion of this part, so don't forget to file those ends. And we're going to grab our bail making pliers, and for this part we're going to use the small end of these pliers, and if you'd prefer you can definitely use round nose. It doesn't matter either way, it gets the job done regardless. Essentially what we're going to be doing is creating some sort of jump ring situation at the end of this wire. So you're going to clamp down on the loose ends, not the end that we folded. You're going to take the loose ends, clamp down on that, and then we're just going to softly round that off. I want to make sure you close that loop as well. We're looking good here. I'm going to go ahead and pull these off the pliers. This is about what it should look like. Notice that there is a little bit of gapping here, so if you have this, just take your chain nose pliers, crimp that down a little bit, or clamp it down a little bit rather, just to close up that opening, and it should look just like this. Now we're going to move on to the hook part of this portion of the project, so grab your bail making pliers again, or a chopstick. Round nose works fine here too. We're going to use the large end of the bail making pliers. The large stem of these bail making pliers is 6 millimeters. You can definitely go up to 8 if you'd like. Also, I'm going to freeze right here. This is very important to know before we move forward. Notice how I'm gripping as close to those loops as possible, and also those loops are facing toward you, facing towards the screen. We're going to actually be hooking the opposite way. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better here. We're essentially just going to round out this hook again away from the same way that the loops are facing. Kind of like this. Just keep folding over, or rounding it off rather. Go ahead and remove that from your pliers. Notice that there is still a little bit of a space there. You absolutely need that so that way it can hook onto your jump ring. We have one more little move to make, so grab your chain nose pliers and we're gonna grip about 5 millimeters up from the tip of that hook and bend it back. This is what your hook should look like, and now we only have one more move left to make before your Viking knit chain or bracelet is complete. For this part, you're simply going to need a jump ring. I just grabbed a 4 millimeter jump ring, and this is what we're going to use to attach our hook to our Viking knit weave. Grab your best friend, your chain nose pliers, and we're just going to open up that jump ring. Be sure to push forward on it and pull back, and don't just yank it open. Hopefully you can see that here. We're just going to take the end of that Viking knit weave, it doesn't matter which end, and hook that on to the jump ring. Then we're going to add our hook to the jump ring and simply close that up. This is what it should look like. And guess what? Congratulations! You have officially finished your very first Viking knit weave chain that can be turned into a bracelet or a necklace, whatever you prefer. I hope you love what you see. As you can tell, this one is a little bit too big for my wrist. Stick around for just a couple more minutes. I'm going to show you what I ended up doing with this Viking knit. But before I do that, here's one last peek at the Viking knit bracelet that we made today. I have another tip for you as far as what to do with these, and I'm going to show you that right now. The piece you see right here actually inspired me to create this tutorial. I figured why not, while I was already working on a Viking knit for this piece as it was. I wanted to go ahead and record it, and hopefully you guys can learn a little something from this. Essentially what I'm doing here is adding the Viking knit that I just created with you onto this pendant. There is going to be one on either side. Her name is Elysian, by the way. She is stunning. I just love her so much. She is currently up for adoption on my website, and here's what it looks like. This is another fun way to utilize your Viking knit weave. It just elevates pieces, makes them stronger. Not to mention there's something really satisfying about creating an entire piece from scratch. I know there are so many of you watching that feel the exact same way. I hope this tutorial has helped you elevate your craft. If you'd like to learn more about the tools and materials you saw here today, be sure to check out the description for the affiliate links. I've also created a free cold forging starter guide for those of you who are interested. It is everything I wish I would have known whenever I started cold forge wire wrapping. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you again for being here to create with me. I hope you love what you're currently holding in your hands. As always, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe so that way I can continue making tutorials like these for you. And if you'd like to see more of my work, head on over to builtoroamdesigns.com. You'll find a ton of beautiful pieces there. I'll see you on the next one.